Hello, everyone. This is Claudiu Murgan, the host of the Spiritual Inspire Show. And my guest today is Nicolai Grosell. Nicolai is a certified core energetics practitioner and an exceptional marriage mentor who works with individuals, couples, and groups in person in New York City, the Hudson Valley, and online for international and out-of-state clients. His practice uses a mode of healing that combines body-centered psychotherapy and spiritual process that is applicable to many problems an individual may face, such as depression, anxiety, addiction, trauma, relationship issues, or a search for more meaning in his life. He brings to his practice a unique combination of years of training in different therapeutic modalities, along with a lifetime of experience on his own healing journey, and as a lifelong student of meditation, mindfulness, neuroscience, consciousness expansion, and spirituality. He speaks several foreign languages, including Danish, Swedish, Norwegian, some German, and some Spanish. So you speak only the easy ones, I understand.
Yeah, that's correct. That's right.
Because he has first-hand experience and understanding of the journey of those working with entheogens and sacred plant medicines like ayahuasca and psilocybin, he also offers counseling to navigate difficult emotional or energetic experiences that can arise during these powerful psychedelic experiences, and guidance to help you integrate your insights and illuminations into your day-to-day life. Nicolai, thank you for joining the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Very much appreciate it.
So usually I start asking my guests, when did they begin their spiritual journey? What was the trigger event in their life? So the same for you. What triggered your spiritual path? When did you realize that there is more to life than asset accumulation and easy entertainment?
Right. So I'm actually from Denmark, and my journey to America, I came over here in '93. I have a background in photography, and I wanted to tackle New York and be one of the big fashion photographers. That was what brought me over here. So I think about 1996 or so, I ran into some personal issues. I wasn't happy, and my business wasn't kind of going the way that I expected, and I just come off a very long stretch of working for some of the bigger fashion photographers in the world, and it was a very physical experience with a lot of all the things that people think of the fashion industry's parties and drugs and travel and famous people. So it was obviously I was in my early 20s, and it was a very great experience, and very I came out of a little village outside Copenhagen, Denmark. So my ego was fed, massively fed over those experiences. So I hit a block in I think '96 when I was about 25 years old, and I was dabbling around in different things to try to figure out what works for me. And a friend of mine that became, and I still is, one of my spiritual teachers, she said, you gotta move the energy in your body. She's like, I can tell that you have these things, but more than that, the energy in your body seemed to be stuck and need to be moved. So she sent me to a core therapist. His name is Warren Moe, and one of the first things he did when I walked into his office, he said to me, he had me talk a little bit about some issues. He said, "Okay, put on these punching gloves and hit this punching bag." And at that point, I was having some difficult issues with my father. I grew up with a setup where there was not an emotional connection, and so I was angry at him. I was angry at my dad, and I didn't know what to do with this energy. So he said, pick something that makes you angry. And I didn't know this guy Warren Moe. He was a great character. He's lost his arm in a climbing accident. He had this metal hook, and he was a good-looking guy, but just such a energetic, different anything I've ever experienced. So he said, pick something, and he was kind of holding the bag up for me, to put some pressure on it. And I visualized my father, and I just went to town on this bag. And I remember walking out of the office that I never felt like that. Like it was like my lungs exploded, and I could breathe, and I had this capacity to just be. And I was like, wow, this is incredible. And that subsequently led to me going to therapy and work with Warren for, probably the better part of 12 years on a bi-weekly basis. And I processed my way through so many things that really had nothing to do with my dad. My dad was just more the catalyst of it. And about 12 years ago, I was could feel that I was sort of done with the fashion industry, and I continued shooting and had a great run as a career. But I hit a plateau. Particularly, I was doing a lot of cosmetic photography. I was working with hair care products and lipsticks and foundations, and which is in that industry is called the beauty industry or cosmetic industry. And then I had a daughter in the meantime, and all of a sudden I was realizing that I was producing all these images that was created to be unobtainable. And I had this internal conflict with it, but this was how I made my money, and this is why I was supporting my family. And then all of a sudden one day I was sitting and I was like, I want to be a therapist, and I want to be a core therapist, because that line of work had really changed my life so dramatically. So very quickly, this was I think it was in June, and by that September, I had joined the program, and it's a 4 or 5. Mine became a 5-year because I took the marriage counseling edition on top of it. But that's how it started, and then I went to school, and then after the 5 years, I slowly shut my photography business down, closed my studio, and now I do the therapy full time. So that's kind of how I got here. So.
Yeah, so we have to show respect for people working in that industry, but in the end, it's something more of a facade with, in my opinion, at least not too much meaning. It's a way of making a living for them, but after a point, I think you get bored of that environment, and you really have to look for a purpose in your life. And I don't know if that's the case only with you, or others are steering from that environment after a while, after they understand the emptiness of what they are doing, because in the end, this is not that much meat behind the scene. That's the sad part.
Yeah, it's a very ego. I mean, it's for a young male, it's perfect, because your ego really gets a massive boost. And on top of that, I got to travel all over the world and see things and meet an amazing. I mean, I still have lots of connections with people all over the place from that industry. So it's not like I didn't take a lot with me when I left it, but it's just very shallow, and it's very facade, and very directed towards how things look. And as you know, life is so much more than that. So, and it doesn't really support the human development. I mean, it does, because it supports the ego, and eventually the ego has to get crushed, or at least put in check, in order for us to become more embodied people. But it threw me over it did exactly what it was supposed to do, because it threw me over the edge, because I was so dialed in on the egotistical place of it. So but yeah, absolutely.
And I think we all have, shallowness in our lives, either at the beginning or in the middle, and hopefully not towards the end, when we, accumulate all this experience and we're supposed to be wiser. But at the beginning, we don't understand, life the way it is. We don't want to listen to our parents most of the time, and we want to make our own mistakes. So that's the issue with being young, trying to experience various events.
Yeah, absolutely. So
now you are a practitioner. So what is core energetics, and how it fits with somatic therapy?
So core energetics is a therapeutic form, and we do talk therapy. I mean, like talk therapy, there's a lot of talk therapy or talking in the core energetics. But what we do different than anybody else, or like 95% of the therapeutic modalities out there, is that we emphasize on the energy which is stuck in your body from traumatic experiences. And I just really want to clarify really quickly, what constitutes a trauma, like how the body responds to it. And it really is when the body experiences a sense of hopelessness, then the body goes into more a fight or flight or freeze, or at least the initial steps of that, which means that a lot of people think that trauma, you have to have had something massive or major happening to you in order to fit into that category. But really, you can find yourself not being able to find your plane between two hubs, and you feel hopeless in that spot, and that actually creates a trauma in your body. So what happens to a trauma is, what we do is we work with two components. We have the energy and we have the consciousness. And the way we look at it is that the consciousness is the story that the client will tell you as a therapist about what happened. The energy is how it feels. So traditional talk therapy primarily focusing on the story part of it, which is absolutely fine. It will give you great understanding of why you feel the way you feel, why you're angry, why you feel hurt, why you feel betrayed. But it doesn't really address how you feel about it. So, if you have a client come into my office and we just talk about it, that means that they now understand that, yes, they were betrayed, and that's why I'm angry. And then they're going to walk out of my office and they will still be angry. So what we do is we'll recreate a scenario that will provoke the emotion, the story part of it. And when the person now is all jacked up, meaning that they're, often what happens is, and I'm sure everybody have experienced this, is that the breath gets very short, it gets very shallow, you start hyper focusing in your eyes, and the adrenaline production goes up, and you're ready to literally beat something up. I will take the person in, this is all created in a very safe environment, but I'll give them a baseball bat, and we have these very large, like 3 by 3 by 3 feet foam cubes, and you will get permission to go to town on this foam cube. Because the theory is that in order to really release the traumatic energy that's stuck in your body, you have to combine it with the story part, meaning it's not enough just go to the gym or go running or go out, split firewood. Now you deal with the energy of it, but the only thing that really happens is that you now get tired. You go home, you get some rest, you have some food, you relax a little bit, and the energy is back. So you have to combine the story part, which is what happened, with the energy of it. When you kind of mesh those two together, that's when the real healing happens. There's a lot of other components to core energetics, but that's probably if I were to narrow it down, it's probably the most significant piece of it, because you literally, like I experienced when I walked into the office with Warren Moe, is that you experience a difference immediately. It's like I see people change like on the spot, because a lot of times, particularly when you work with people that have been violated, I work a lot with women and men that have been, for example, sexually violated. There is this notion that you are not allowed to be angry about it, or the anger doesn't make any difference because it's already happened. So when you recreate the situation and the person is actually in it, and then you give them permission, and it's not me giving permission, but the situation creates permission for the client to change the story, meaning to act out the option they didn't have when the situation initially happened. The healing happens. So to see a woman, or man with gloves on and actually get to fight off this perpetrator is one of the most significant things I think I've ever experienced, and one of the most powerful on a human level, one of the most powerful thing, because you see the person, like it's instantaneously the possibility of a different outcome opens. It's not done. Sometimes it takes years to process your way all the way through it, depending on what happened. But the possibility of a different way of being in relation to that has opened, and that's like, it happens instantaneously, and that's just, it's phenomenal. I mean, it's just phenomenal. So
it's a transformative experience. So also,
very
how
much.
do you work with the subconscious of a person? Because the subconscious works all the time, is on all the time, and our conscious mind doesn't know exactly all the information which is accumulated in there.
Right.
Trauma is also part of our embedded into our subconscious. How do you bring that up?
Well, so the subconscious. So the way I work with the subconscious is that most people that come into my office, and we're talking like in a 75% range, come into my office for some particular reason they think they have an issue with, but within a very short time they will be somewhere else. So what the subconscious does is, the brain will alter a story or a situation in order for us to survive. It doesn't really care so much about what your story is. What it cares about is that you actually survive as a human. So the subconscious kind of, it's like the stock energy is trying to come up to this, it's bubbling up to the surface, and it will come up in any way it can. It will pick any route it can. Like, so, it'll be passive aggressive, it will be addiction, it will be, underhanded things, because your body's trying to get back to homeostasis. So the subconscious is really just there to, it will show you something that is out of line. And then if I take somebody, like, one of the first questions I often ask people is, when somebody comes into me and let's say they talk about that their relationship with their boyfriend or girlfriend is not working. Like, this person's just driving me crazy. I'll have them, we'll do maybe some short breath work together. We'll do some grounding, like standing on something to get in contact with your feet, take some breath into your body and get centered. And then I'll ask them a very simple question. I'll just say, where else in your life have you experienced this energy? And then they'll take a breath in, they'll quiet their mind for a second, and then they'll go, oh, you know what? And then we're on our way. So the subconscious is kind of like, the roadmap. It's kind of like the way we, all I need is like a little sprout of a leaf to attach to, and then we can from there we can run with it. So that's often how we, and then the other thing about the subconscious is that we work with what's called a body-mind connection, which is your body's inability to differentiate between what's actually happening and what's a thought, particularly if it's backed by an emotion. So if I present something to a client, I'll have within a very short time, I'll have a good sense of what it is that they're working on. Like, you can see, like, at this point, I mean, I've done this for 10 years now, but 10, 12 years, I think, but you can sort of smell it right away. Like, you can see if it's physical abuse, if it's sexual abuse, if it's addiction, just by, body language and how the person carries themselves. So often I'll throw a question in there that is like, to the right of whatever is the actual issue, but there is similarities in the question to the issue that I think it is. And just by see how the person responds to the question will sort of tell me where to go. And then we'll lead into that. And then the last thing I want to add to it is that the way I conduct my therapy is always based on how I feel with the person, because since we're creating a sort of a microcosm of the world outside, I can just tell my breath. Like, I can feel my breath, and I can feel if I'm nervous or if my breath is short or shallow, if I'm excited, if I feel embodied or strong or weak or enticed or whatever it is. And in most cases, like in the upper 90% of the time, is if I were to ask my client, how do you feel right now? They feel the same way I feel, which means I use myself to see where the client is without even necessarily talking to them. So
it's like you're using your body like a tuning fork to resonate
right.
with the client and being on the same vibration. And that's amazing. We
absolutely.
as human, we are fascinating subjects to work on. It's just
amazing. Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. So.
You are also a exceptional marriage mentor. So is this about couples going through a rough period and coming to you? How does it work?
Well, so couples are actually in the core tradition, or the idea of core, couples are actually one of the most fascinating things to work with, because the fastest place to grow is within a relationship, because your partner becomes a mirror. And since you're with this mirror 24/7, meaning energetically, that means that whatever you are not willing to look at will be played out within the relationship. So very often couples come into my office and and there's usually three things that couples come to therapy with. It is the ability to be individual within the couple. So time spent together and time spent apart within the couple. And you don't necessarily have to go in opposite places to be apart, but the ability to be individual within the couple and then be together. There's usually one person that wants more than the other or less than the other. Then it's finances. somebody's either spending too much money or not enough money or not making enough money or making too much money. And then there's sex. It has to do with like not enough sex or more sex or less variations of sex. So those are I would say, the majority of the questions. So, but the core modality as a whole can just be applied to the couples, because if let's say I have a couple coming in and the woman want more sex or more sexual connection and intimacy, and the guy doesn't. So traditionally, you would try to fight this out between them or figure out what is it about them that's not working. But what I will do, or what we do in core, is we will dig into the man and say, well, what does sex or the intimacy, what does that really mean for you? And then we do the same thing. We do the grounding, we do the breath work, get into the body. And very quickly, what happens for him is that there's some relationship to his own sexuality that is pre-existing to the marriage, that is played out within the marriage. So in that sense, it becomes, when you get over the initial, anger or frustration. So often I'll have a couple come in and I'll give them the baseball bat or the punching gloves and the cube, and I'll just have them deflate themselves, meaning we'll move a bunch of energy out, like really, so you physically get tired. Because one of the things that I have come to learn in core is that of working with people is that we hold our emotions with our physicality. Meaning, if you're a strong person, I'm sure most people can relate to the fact that something unpleasant comes your way, and the first thing we do is we tighten our bellies. Like we get ready to, like, it's almost like you're getting ready to get a punch in your gut. So that's a physical, capability. So if I were to like work your body, meaning have you move a lot of energy, you won't be able to take the punch in the gut the same way, which means that you're more susceptible to what comes at you. And now the emotions can more readily move. So I'll have them move a lot of energy out just so they get sort of tired. And also, we all have this persona or mask, and that's something I would love to talk about as well in core is, but we have this mask we put on, which is sort of, you can look at it as the way everybody dress when they leave their house. It's like we put on a mask and we go out in the world. So when you deflate the physicalities or the energy, then the mask gets less, pronounced. It's like it doesn't have as much power, because if I were to give you a baseball bat and you don't necessarily know me that well, and I was like, go and hit this cube, and you start hitting and you start sweating and you start making some noise, it's like the ability to stay within the preconceived box that we have created is kind of shattered, because yes, you look a little crazy, and yes, you sound a little crazy. That's kind of the whole point of it, is to get you out of your comfort zone, so things can now make sense or mean something, because it's not going to hit in the spot that you want it to hit. It's going to hit where it actually means something to you. Meaning, if your husband stands in front of you and say, I got annihilated. Like, I got into puberty. This is actually something that happened, was that the husband, when we started working on the sexual thing, it turns out that he got into puberty a lot later than his peers. And he was therefore bullied, particularly when he was in gym and had to shower. So his whole idea of him being a man was somewhat crushed even before it surfaced. And he had never done any work around it. So when we took him through that process, he got to shed the bunch of tears about this, the feeling of annihilation that he'd experienced. And then when he had gotten through that piece of it, then he got angry that somebody would treat him that way, and he pushed into the anger. He got the gloves, and sometimes if I feel it's appropriate, I will step in and I'll be the energy of something, like, so I can take on the perpetrator energy or a father figure or a lover figure or whatever it is. But in this particular case, I took on the energy as the classmates. So I put my boxing shield up, and he got his gloves, and he got to actually move this energy in a very physical way towards an actual human being. And sure enough, within a relatively short time, the couple here were able to connect because the wife were able to open her heart towards her husband because she didn't know. She didn't know that his inability to meet her was because he didn't have this kind of sense of self. But when he got grounded, he was able to maybe a little haphazard and maybe a little clumsy, but he was able to stand in his manhood and say, I'm at least willing to meet you here, whatever that looks like. And because she loved him, she was able to say, okay, well, let's take this very slow. So, and sure enough, within a certain amount of time, they were able to come together and as far as I know, are doing well. And, so from that perspective, core is just a phenomenal process. Absolutely phenomenal. So.
Interesting. So would you say that regardless of the reason they come to you, the commonality in the end is communication? Because if they didn't communicate before, they will have to communicate after the process is done and after they solve some of their issues. And in order not to go back to the same issues, they have to keep communicating and addressing each other and putting all the issues on the table. Is that a true statement?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit like you said before about the subconscious mind is that when you're in a couple like that, it feels real, right? Like he doesn't love me. He's not attracted to me. It feels very real to the person, but when you get underneath it, which is what we do as therapists, is we help the client get underneath it. Then we open up the communication. So there's all of a sudden an ability to speak candidly. Well, I feel this. Well, I feel that. I don't like this. I don't like that. And we just throw it all out there. And then when people tend to get into tracks, right? So when we're in a relationship, it's like, I'm here, you're here, and we'll move like this. Right, but all of a sudden we crack it, and all of a sudden there is a new energy flow because we have broken the habitual setup. So yes, communication is huge, but I would add to it that the understanding of who we are is probably the first step, because if you don't know, I can't fault you for something you don't know. So the idea is, as soon as you know, then you can talk about it. And if you're received by your partner in a way where he or she is able to be objective enough to hold you in whatever process you're in, then you're set. Then you're absolutely set.
Yeah, and people have to understand that bottling up all these issues, either from childhood or later on in life, will create disease in our bodies because everything is energetic. And right. I recently read a book about how a scientist from US, which was very successful on the business side, was very smart. He couldn't hold 2 marriages, and his body started to frozen up from bottom up. So at one point, he was paralyzed up to groin and to his groin, and he had to go to Australia to the Bushmen. So it was very lucky to get the message to go there. And they took him through this process of understanding his energetic blockages, and for him to accept where they were coming from his childhood with his father, who wasn't able to express emotions. And that's why he couldn't get into a private and personal relationship with his wife, exactly similar to what you just said. And he went there in a wheelchair, and he walked away on his own feet just because he was able to release all that trauma with people who never went to school, and they were just having a connection with the divinity from a different perspective, different angle. It was very interesting story.
Yeah. I absolutely believe that. I mean, I've heard similar stories, different, but the thing about it is, we already know all this. We just forgotten, but we already know. It's like it's absolutely. So I agree.
How do you fit neuroscience in your program? It's pretty much everything you just mentioned, or is a special component?
It's yes and no. It's for me. It's more. It's one of the things that I'm really starting to study myself and but it's not really a part of the core theory, so to speak. It's
okay. So let me ask this question. During the presentation, during your introduction, in fact, I mentioned your experience with psychedelics. How was your experience with it, and how did they influence your life?
So yeah, it's so I had the fortune to start work with ayahuasca a little over a year and a half ago. So was my first introduction to it, and it's something I've been wanting to do for a long time. But it was also very clear about that it had to come to me. Like I wasn't gonna go and look for it. So I put it out there, and after years, it actually came to me, and I got the opportunity. And for me, ayahuasca is it's like it's a power tool to work with. But I would suggest to anybody out there is to do some traditional therapy before they go in and start work with medicine. And the same thing goes for psilocybin. I don't have as much experience with psilocybin as I do with ayahuasca, but because the amount of information that's released when you go through these processes, if you are particularly if you're an ungrounded person already, if you and in core we're talking about what's called character structures, and some of the structures, particularly the earlier ones, have a hard time being in this world. Like if a lot of times you find people that are very spiritual and very much into spirituality is actually a compensation because they have a hard time being on the ground. So that kind of person will have a hard time process a large amount of information. And ayahuasca, at least my experience, has been that it is like doing 10 therapy sessions in a 3-hour span. It's like the amount of information that comes at me is astonishing. So I have absolutely loved my experience, but I've also done thousands of hours of therapy. So I have a network of people to integrate with, and I also have a large capacity to understand what's revealed. That said, I think it's the future of therapy in many ways, not solely because we still need to process it, because really the work starts after the ceremony. It's the ceremony is kind of like unbottling or pull the plug out, however you want to describe it, and then you need to process it. But the one thing that I think any of these things, I mean, people work with MDMA and with ketamine as well. They have in common is that particularly people that have had very big traumas, and I've worked with quite a few people that have had traumas that are so large that their nervous system is not really letting them through the veil, because the feeling is that this is so scary that I will die, I'll literally perish if I were to go through here. So they kind of have this like rocking experience. They'll bang up against the wall, and it doesn't really matter how much therapy we do or how deep we go, they won't go there. So what psychedelics does is it almost drills a hole. If I were to illustrate it, would drill a hole through the veil, and it'll allow you to, for a short amount of time, peek in or step into the arena of whatever it is that you're working on or can work on, and do a little bit of familiarization in there. And what most people realize when they go in is that what they're most fearful of is the fear itself. When they're actually in it, it has a certain amount of groundedness and natural rhythm to it, because that's just how we are created. So then when they come back out of again, then we can slowly start like work our way in it. So for people with big traumas, it's the future. There's no doubt about it. And I really hope that it becomes more mainstream. I mean, it's extremely mainstream, but a little bit on the ground right now. But you know, my hope is that it's going to surface up and become something that is really.
Sometimes these people, they have to surrender. If they don't surrender, that hole you just mentioned can still be very, very small, and because their ego is afraid of letting go, understanding what's on the other side. So if their rational mind is very powerful, even with ayahuasca, they might have not so pleasant experience, instead of opening up and finding out what the message is for them in particular. So they have to let go, to understand and be coached at the beginning, to let go, surrender, and they will receive the message.
And one thing I want to just add really quickly is that I'm actually just started working with a psychiatrist in New York, because I mean, I'm not licensed to prescribe medication, but so I had a client that wanted to go through a process, but he wanted to do it assisted. So I'm sort of sidelining with a psychiatrist in the city, and he had done some ketamine experiences, and it was really profound. We did it remotely. So he was in his home in Connecticut, and she was in New York City, and I was in my home in upstate New York, and we got on a 3.5 hour session with him where he took the ketamine, and then he went through the experience, and he's had a very rough time with feeling wanted by his parents. So we had already uncovered all this. So we created this scenario, and he's about 20 years younger than I am. So she and I stepped into this role as parents, created an environment. And what surprised me was that I expected to feel very different not being with the client in person. But the amazing part was that, and it just kind of proves the power of the intent, is that when we did some meditation prior to go in, we sat down, we created like a container, like visually, created a container around the situation. And he had a profound experience with it. And I could feel like, sitting for 3.5 hours, and at the time went like bang. It felt like, an hour at the most, because then I knew, because I was in that zone, which is the same zone I get into when I'm working. So like I literally remove me out of the way and become, for lack of a better word, it's like we become channels. Like it comes through. So it's not me, Nicolai, creating this. It is me hooking into the divine, and then we go through, or the universal energy, or whatever, however you want to address it.
Yeah, I mean, the other day I was talking to Dr. Carl Kalaman about the future of psychedelics as part of healing process. Mm-hmm. And we talk about psilocybin and DMT maybe. Only these two, I think, can be taken in a safe environment, mm-hmm. in a lab. They are doing research right now. But I don't think ayahuasca or San Pedro or Ebola can become a mainstream substance, because, they are taken in a jungle type of environment with a ceremony, with a shaman. It's mm-hmm. a different type of experience right. has right. to have in order to get the healing and the messages. So right. in the end, the healing process with psychedelics will be limited to maybe 2 or 3 substances.
Yeah, I mean, and I'm sure that there's such an overlap between what they do. So any of them that comes on the marketplace as something that is mainstream, I mean, I'm all for it. I mean, I can guarantee you that if people with post-traumatic stress, let's say soldiers coming back from war, if they were put through a psychedelic, therapeutic, deep deprogramming process after coming back, it would look completely different. It would look absolutely completely different, because I mean, if imagine you're going down the road and somebody blows a bomb off right next to you, how are you going to get your nervous system to want to go back to that? Like it's almost impossible, right? So you need something that will take you out of you and drill you through and let you in, so you can, even you just punch a minute little hole in whatever the experience, and it starts seeping out. At least there is a process, and so that's I would love to do a research on that. I feel very strongly about it.
Yeah, and that will be possible only if we'll be able to inject some humanity into those leading the pharma industry, and right. politicians, right. in order to accept right. This easier type of treatment, and in my opinion, much cheaper, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. But that's yeah. I'm not going to go down that rabbit. There's a whole different conversation. I have very strong opinions about that. So
yeah, me too. You mentioned about integration. Integrating the messages through a psychedelic experience into a daily life. How do you find your clients? How willing are they to integrate the messages, and did they see any changes, positive changes in their life?
Yeah, I mean, it's again, I mean, again, mine is limited to psilocybin and to ayahuasca. But what I have seen with the people that I work with that have gone through that process is it's almost like the medicine has gotten a grip on you, and it's not whether you want to integrate it. It's just integrating. It's like they will. I mean, they'll come into my office and they'll say, I had a thought, and you're kind of like, yeah, you had a thought, and I'm kind of chuckling because I know that thought, right? I know that place where the spirit just kind of said, just look at this, right? Like, let me just turn your head 40 degrees that way and look at that. And you're like, oh, and you see something. So it's beautiful. I mean, it really entrusts some trust in humanity. When I see what it, like the intelligence, like the universal intelligence shows up through the medicine. Because people make choices. I have made choices, particularly after I went to the jungle, to the Amazon, and stayed down there for 9 days and was on this no food, no salt diet for 9 days, and then we did rapid a series of ceremonies. And it's like the choices I made when I came back, even after 13, 14 years of therapy, I never got to there through therapy, and I probably never would. But a week of this work just brought me to, and I came home and I cleaned up some relationships and I let go of some relationships, and you become a different human. I mean, it's like the internal compass you have. It's all of a sudden so loud within you that if you're out on integrity. Like, it's not a matter of you have to go and touch the stove to figure out if it's hot or not. You just have to like check in. It's like right there. And that's what my clients do. I mean, I see them come in and it's the same thing. It's like the things that were worrisome before have some potency, but have dialed down, and all of a sudden they're on their way to do. I mean, and then the things you can't describe. I mean, I saw Notre Dame burn 3 weeks before it burned in a ceremony. Like, I can't tell you what that is. I can just tell you that I saw it, right? Like, how do you see that? Like, of all churches in the world, how do you see that? And it's like, I don't know. But I have to trust that whatever that was, that intelligence is present all around us. And that's not therapy. That's, God, spirit, Allah, Buddha, whatever, however, right? It's whatever name works for you. But that's, to me, that's what it is. That's what it is. So.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, I decided to integrate the messages in my life, and I can vouch for things getting better.
Right.
Recently, I went through a 2-day San Pedro retreat, and it was much different than ayahuasca. It's very subtle. You are waiting to be slapped on the face, and nothing happens. And you just look around, but you are at peace, and nature is there, and you are part of it. And we are still wondering when I'm going to get the message. And shaman said it's very subtle. It's going to affect you on your subconscious level, and just give it some time, 2, 3, 4 weeks, and you'll see those changes. But you have to learn how to work with San Pedro, the grandfather, opposing to ayahuasca, which again is much more forceful and gives you the answers you are looking for right away.
Right.
So what are your next projects?
What is my next project? Well, I mean, it's the next project I'm working on is really actually due to this whole coronavirus, is I have shifted my practice, but I'm because core is such a physical experience, and so it was somewhat believed that you couldn't really do core remotely. I've had a series of clients that are not in state, like in other countries and other places in America. So I've had some experience with it, but I'm actually shifting my practice to a virtual only, at least for right now, because of the COVID, I had to, to shift over, and I had to figure out how do I do this with people, because we have all the tools that we use. And so I've come up with this kind of cool little package where we will be creating, like, for new clients, we'll send them a little care package with some of the tools in that we need. And it's actually very simple. It's just a golf ball or something to stand on, and a little bit of literature about what we do. And then we're in the process of developing an online version of it, and I actually host meetups every Thursday, where we're really, put it to the test. Is like, can we actually reach people? Can we actually get people engaged? Can we actually generate new clients? Obviously, because there's also, besides I love what I do, it's also a livelihood, without actually ever being in physical contact. So it's gone really well, and I'm starting to have a sense that it's I can probably do the majority of what I did before in an online version. I just have to tweak it a little bit, but that's been the latest thing. So,
Nicolai, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Very interesting. I learned new stuff today, which I really like doing every day. Any other final thoughts?
There's one thing I really want to, which is a totally different topic, but I think is very important, which is Core. Core is working with something called character structures, which is the developmental of a human between 3 months of pregnancy until around 7 years of age, and it's broken down to 5 categories, and based on how your body looks, you fit in. So most of us fit into one category primarily, but then we'll have traces of all the other ones. And the fascinating part about it is that if I see a person in a bathing suit, for example, or dressed so you have a sense of what their body looks like, I would be able to dial their difficulties within an 80% range without ever talking to them, just based on how they breathe, how their eye movements are, how their body is, how their hair patterns are, how their, the color of their skin, the thickness of their wrists, the lips position, like all those things. And it's a very big piece of Core, and anybody interested in it, it's very, 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 very fascinating, spot on, and just a very important piece of it. So
interesting. So once again, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
And for those watching this show, please subscribe, share, visit my Patreon account. It's always good to support me. There is a lot of effort and time putting into these videos, which are free for you. And until next time, love and gratitude.